Okay, everybody get the pin entered in yet? Let's go and get that done. Okay, how's everybody doing tonight? Okay? All right, well, let's go and get started. Let's see here. This Thursday we'll be doing a DriveLook lab where DriveLook forensics will be able to index your hard drive from, we're going to do like about I think it's like a 5 meg index. But this app's been around for a while, and what it does, it indexes every word or letter ever written to your hard drive, whether it be words people actually typed in, pictures, whatever. When you delete something from your hard drive or people think they delete it and go to recycle bin, this lab shows you it's not actually ever deleted. And so shows you how you can retrieve data, because what I have you do is actually create a real small partition, put a file in that partition, delete that file, and also delete it from recycle bin, and then run this app, and you bring everything back 100% as far as all the words are searchable. And so we'll talk about ways that companies do what's called zero formatting, to where drives are disabled totally and cannot be searchable. But this is kind of an eye-opener for security students, because a lot of students think coming into class maybe that when you delete stuff from your recycle bin or from your cache in Internet Explorer or Firefox, that it's gone, and it's not. It's always there. There's software like this that we'll use Thursday that shows you how you can retrieve, like I said, every character ever written to your hard drive since the beginning of time is retrievable. Now, it doesn't mean you can retrieve the file. It just means you can find that the file is there. And then there's other software we'll talk about where you can actually retrieve files. This software is basically just for investigation purposes only, and IT labs will use it to scour local computers to determine if folks have been doing things they shouldn't be doing during a workplace environment. And so DriveLook, totally free. We'll also talk about low-level formatting, Recovo, which is a recovery file system that's open source, ESUS, which is a backup solution that's open source as well. But the lab will be focusing totally on DriveLook. Final presentations begin in 2 weeks, last name A through N, and that night you're going to give your presentation that week, actually, Tuesday and Thursday. We'll split it up. Whoever wants to come first is fine. I'm not going to tell you have to go in this order. Just make sure you go A through N in 2 weeks, so Tuesday or Thursday, okay? Your research paper is due the night of your presentation, and so you'll submit it starting in week 15 Dropbox. And so be ready for that. The other thing is my iOS class is beginning to develop their final applications and looking for possible testers. Here's some of the apps that they're creating. Cheeseburger sales, this is a POS sales system for a restaurant. Ring toss game uses kind of buoyancy in water to play a ring toss game. Self-hosted controlled cloud is kind of a shoot off of Dropbox. Instead of being in the cloud, it's actually hosting it on your Mac or PC, all of your files remotely. Original conference, this student's doing it for a church conference coming up that's got about 2,500 attendees this week, and so they're actually working on that now. Spelling challenge, this is an actual teacher that's developing this for his class on spelling and being able to create spelling flashcards with audio, and then be able to actually have the students not only spell it, but speak it as well. And so he's working on that. PharmaMeds flashcards, this is for pharmaceutical or medical, those in the medical field, have to do with pharmaceutical and pharm med words that they have to deal with as far as medical jargon. Dunk hunt type game. This one actually has to do with the shoot game with ducks going across the screen. Property inspection report. That's yours. It has to do with real estate, and it's going to be an application for real estate inspection, basically, for realtors. Is that pretty close? Somewhere around that. And then CIVE, Can I Have? Scott Fuston. He actually has it's a calorie counting app for those who want to count their calories, which I don't, which I should. Maybe you should too. Anyways, it's a pretty cool app where it keeps score of your calories and it kind of gives you suggestions and things of that nature. He showed me his last night. It's looking pretty good. And then Armador's Hub, Joseph Whitaker. This guy's actually in he's an art background and does a lot of art for comic strips and games. And so he's done it from like Florida, New York. Anyway, this app is actually going to highlight some of the artwork for the games that his company's developed. And so it's going to be high quality images. It'll be videos as well of the games that they've developed along with images. So if you're interested, I have on our Facebook page for CIS Division the steps. If you need an iPhone or iPad, that's all you need. You download a free UDID tool that basically tells me your UDID. You email me that UDID, and then in hopefully a week and a half or so, you'll get an email from me on how I need you to test these apps, okay? And it won't take just a few minutes to test, and so they're students like you, and so definitely help them. If you know anyone that, if you don't have an iPhone or iPad, but you know someone that does, they just have to be a student or faculty member to be able to test these apps, okay? And that's all I need for those to do is the 5 steps there, and then you can become a tester. And we're going to do what's called over-the-air testing, where basically you'll get an email from me that'll have a link to the app, it'll install it on your device, and then you can begin testing, okay? Questions on that? So if you're yourself not interested or you don't have an iOS device to do this with, you can tell other students as well. It's on the CIS website and also on our Facebook page, the steps how to do it. So hopefully we've had about 7 or 8 faculty and about 4 or 5 students already jump on board, so that's good. So if anybody has any questions, let me know and I'll help you with that. So tonight we're going to cover policies and procedures as it pertains to security. I did a couple web searches before class just to kind of see the results here for network security analyst. No state or region really, just a general network security analyst search, and it came up with 1,125 jobs. And again, that didn't do any certain area. This one actually was network security protocols, 2,486 jobs. So somewhere in the description had to do with network security protocols. And so that's what we're talking about tonight. And the importance of those security protocols and those rules that everybody in a workplace doesn't much like sometimes, but it's needed. And we'll find out why it's needed. So one of the things, the reason for security policies is to help the company become, so they are liable or aren't liable for those incidences. If you don't have a security policy, the employees have to sign off on, both on computers, cell phone, whatever communication, and then they do something illegal with that, and you don't have a security policy in writing that they've signed off on, you can get sued, okay? Or vice versa, if maybe your employees are, something happens to their personal data, which maybe they shouldn't be bringing to work anyway, but that's a whole nother subject, but if their personal data may be corrupted because of something on your network, this can cover you as well from liability. So it's kind of like insurance, you could say, having a policy. Now, does anybody like security policies? I do, but I like them just because of what it saves employers from. Does it take more time for security policy? Yeah. And do most people even read it? No. We'll find that out tonight. But you have to have it there, just like, I guess, the fine print on everything you buy today, whether it be prescriptions, whether it be a box of cereal. Everything has a warning label of some type on it today, right? And so most people don't read it, but legalese, you might have heard of that term, legalese has to be on everything, including in IT. And so we'll also look at some of the policies, also describe, lastly tonight, the impact of social engineering, which is the #1 way still that people get into networks. Not through hacking, but social engineering, okay? So you really don't have to have any technical skills, but social engineering skills to get into a network. And so one of the ways to begin a policy, a security policy, is to plan for it. And policies have to be established somewhat by an organization to ensure that users correctly implement hardware and software defenses. Okay? You might have heard recently, I think it was it a Highlander and is it Schnucks, is that right? Schnucks? I always pronounce that wrong. Had a security breach this last week. We don't know when, but they did release it. It might have been a month ago, but they released it this last week that over 1 million credit cards, debit cards were breached. And they interviewed a lady on the news last night that said that she'd already gotten a notice from her bank on some activity that was abnormal, and they're sending her another card. So I'm guessing, you might have been affected by that, or somebody in your family might have been affected by that, but that's pretty recent. Now, I'm not putting any blame on Schnucks, because it can happen to any company, but it could be, were they following all security policies? Were things were being followed from the cashier to the person handling the money in the back room, to the person taking the money to the bank, to how they batch out at night with the credit card machines? There's a whole bunch of different policies that have to be followed, and were those all followed? I don't know. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Now, one of the key policies in any organization should be the security policy of that organization. And basically, security policy is a written document of how the company protects its information. That information could be what? What type of information does a company have of yours that's has to do with you?
Name, address, social security number.
Everything, right? They got it all. Your past history, where you lived, your phone number, social security, as you said. So everything they have is about you. And so it's pretty important that stuff is kept safe. And so you need some type of security policy for that #1 reason. And then also organizations have other umbrella policies to where it can be serve several functions, like an overall intention and direction, detail specific risk and how to address them. It can create a security-aware organizational culture, help to ensure that employee behavior is directed and monitored. An effective security policy must carefully balance 2 key elements, trust and control. And so you've got 3 approaches to trust, and this kind of goes back to the email lab we did a few weeks back, where I think I told you guys to trust ultimately each other on that trust that we set up. But here's 3 levels of trust: basic trust, trust everyone all the time, trust no one at any time, trust some people some of the time. And so deciding on the level of control for security policy is not always clear. The security needs and the culture for organization play a major role when deciding what level of control is appropriate for productivity. Because if you have too much control, you limit productivity and you limit making money. If you don't make money, you don't have a job. And so there is a balance between, can you have so much control and so much security that you impede progress? Yeah, definitely you could. And maybe you've worked at places like that. Anybody worked at places where it was so much on the other side that it was like, way overboard in some areas? Anybody experience that at a workplace? Can you name just a couple examples of what you've experienced? Right.
But even if you want to transfer files to get to your files somewhere else, it's a nightmare.
Right, to try to get it done. And it's understandable with the HIPAA laws and everything, but yeah, you're right, that would be one that would be a nightmare. And it could impede your work day, definitely. Anybody else have anything else? So hospitals definitely, because with HIPAA laws, and even at schools, actually, when I first started here, the student IDs were your social security number years ago. Think about that. Okay, that had to be changed, years back because of FERPA violations or FERPA laws, not violations, so it wouldn't be a violation. We had to change it to an actual ID. But security has to do with the culture that you're in. In hospitals, it's about the patient's medical records. Here, it's about students' financial records and your personal data. So in here, you've got user group and attitude towards security. So users, in general, want to be able to get their work done without restrictive controls. Makes sense, right? You want to be able to come to work. You understand some security aspects that you need to get done to get, to get into the door, to log into your computer. But beyond that, it can be cumbersome, maybe, possibly. So system support personnel, concerned with ease of managing systems under tight security controls. So those that support users want to be able to get into the computers, be able to get into the systems, to add a new user, to give rights, to add a new printer, whatever the case may be, right? And so in order to do that, you have to have rights to do that. Management is concerned about the cost of security protection for attacks that may not materialize. The argument from management is, never happened before. Why do we have to spend money on it? It's literally never happened. We've never had any incident whatsoever. And they could be totally 100% correct on that. Okay? But that's not to say something couldn't happen and that you shouldn't have some security to thwart things from happening. And so one of the jobs of IT is to present things in such a way to where management can understand it in real world scenario, dollar and cents. Here's an example. Okay, you don't want to spend $120,000 on a backup and recovery plan. Let's talk about right now what we have. If the building was to burn down, we have no recovery plan. So that means it would take us probably, with the latest backups that we store off site, and I'm just giving a scenario of a business, it's a week and a half old. The full backup's a week and a half old. So we would lose a week and a half of data. Also, it would take us, let's say 24, 48 hours to restore all just the data. Now we're not talking about getting phones back up and running, having an off-campus or off-site system to set up. And so we could lose, we'll just put a number out there, $250,000 the first month because we do not have a disaster recovery plan if the building was to burn down. And it's going to cost $120,000 to bring HP in here to get a disaster recovery plan in place. Do you think it's worth it? I think it's worth it. Okay? And so you have to sell it like that. That's management understand, oh, okay, $250,000, or we spend $120,000 to insure, and that's just 1 month, $250,000. If it goes on further, it could be more than that. And that's just a guesstimate as well. You might have customers that never come back because of miscommunication, or they cannot call the customer because there's no phones to call the customers. Okay? And so things like that, arguments IT management has to make to CEO, CIO type folks to sell, as an example, of disaster recovery. Standards and defining security policies. You've got a couple of them here, 3 of them actually. One is a standard, a guideline, and a policy. A standard is basically just a collection of requirements specific to a system or procedure that everybody must follow. A standard could be everybody has to use a proximity card to enter a door. Everybody has to enter in your password to enter your computer. Okay? A guideline is a collection of suggestions that should be implemented. Okay? A guideline could be you cannot share your password with your neighbor. Okay? You can't force that, but it's a guideline. Okay? It's a guideline for people that they should follow. And then a policy is a document that outlines specific requirements or rules that must be met, and that could be such things as, you can't you can't do personal email at work. You can't work on personal work at work. You can't make personal phone calls at work. The list goes on and on of things. You can't, give Joe your security biometric card or your proximity card to let him in the door. things of that nature. And so these are standards, guidelines, and policies. Now, do all of these take money to create what I just talked about? They do. And again, management's going to buck in the system maybe if you try to implement some of these. We've never had an issue before. Again, you could bring cases in of businesses that didn't have this as either. Maybe had, I don't know, let's say somebody busted into a business and stole 20 computers because it didn't have proximity card doors, and it was, easy to break into the business. They just busted the door open, got in. Stole 20 computers, now they're out, let's say, $25,000. Okay, to implement this security policy, to get members of my team to develop this policy and to implement it, we'll say it might cost us $12,000 man hours to get done. Okay, we got something buzzing, getting ready to take off. That happened earlier, by the way, so I don't know what's going on. Yeah, just ignore. So when you design a security policy, here's some characteristics of designing it. One is to communicate that there is a consensus of judgment. And so policies also define appropriate behavior. They identify tools and procedures that are needed, and to provide HR action for inappropriate behavior. So it could be, again, you gave your proximity card to somebody, this is a procedural guideline you broke, you're now suspended or fired, depending upon the severity and what HR has down for that. Policies may also be helpful in an event that's necessary to prosecute violators. If you don't have policies, it's hard for judges sometimes or impossible for judges or your company attorneys to fight for you if you don't have any type of written documentation on here's what they're supposed to follow. And by the way, they sign this on their day of employment, which everybody in here, regardless of what job you've worked at, whether a lot or little, we've all had to sign some paperwork saying, okay, we're not going to do this, we are going to do this type of thing. So the more policies you have for people to sign, the better you are at court if an employee was to bring you to court. The cycle of security policy, the first phase is basically risk management study. We've talked about this already a little bit, which is asset identification, threat, vulnerability, risk assessment, risk mitigation. The second phase is going into that policy and from the list at the front, the first phase, and making a policy itself from that risk management study. The final phase is to review it for compliance in your organization. So you can take everything from medical to colleges, to insurance companies, to Coca-Cola and Pepsi, to grocery stores. They're all going to be able to apply these rules and steps to create a security policy. So you've got basically the risk management study, security policy, and then compliance monitoring. Because every year new laws come out, locally, federally, state, that might change things. New technology comes out that might change things as well. Steps in development when designing security policy, they're different, and the book gives one way of doing it, just one principal way of doing it. It's advisable the design of security policy should be a work of a team. The way I've done it in the past is have some folks from IT, but every person in every department, have one person from every department a part of this team to become vested in the policy procedures. That way, and they don't generally have to be, and probably in my estimation, should not be management. They should be somebody outside of management in that first iteration of meetings, because they're going to come up with some pretty good, folks who work in those departments actually do more and work more in those areas of management, or they should anyway, right? On a day in, day out basis. And so they're going to know a little bit more about what's going wrong, what's going right, what we need to change. The team should first decide on the scope and goals. You want to kind of, what I tell teams is, okay, give us pie in the sky stuff that we want as a group, and we're going to have to bring it down, but let's go shoot for the stars first on things that we want for security. And then you kind of decide on the middle ground of what you think you can do, both cost effectiveness, training, implementation, all the good stuff. Then I bring in the management into the group after those sessions of meetings, and it might take 4 to 6 weeks to do that. and then say, here's our findings. Here's our due diligence on what we've done to find the security policies for our location. Here's what it's going to cost. Here's a plan to implement it. Get back with us on it. Get back with me on it. And then they'll make some changes and some tweaks. Get back with the first group again. Finalize it. Put it back to management again the last time. And then the ball's rolling for a timeline, a deadline, all that good stuff. Again, all this process might take 6 months to a year to implement, but it'll be worth it. Now, statements regarding due care are often included when it comes to security policies. The obligations that are imposed on owners and operators of assets to exercise what's called reasonable care of the assets and take necessary precautions to protect them. So here are some security policy musts and what the security policy should do. So the must is be implementable and enforceable. Okay, here's an example of stuff that's not implementable and enforceable and that I've come against before. Changing the password every 2 weeks. That was one that went, not going to happen. It's too soon. It's too short of a time frame. Here's one that is implementable and is also enforceable. Let's change the password every 60 days. There you go. Or every 90 days. That's something doable. And then state the reasons why this policy is necessary. To secure the data in our network and to secure our procedures and our policies, employees at ABC Company have to change their password every 60 days. Okay? And here's the rules. Here's the mnemonics on character length, alphanumeric, all that good stuff. And then the policy also must be concise and easy to understand. Describe what's covered by the policy, password protection policy, internet browsing policy, phone policy, door access policy, data document sharing policy, email policies. Balance protection with productivity. Outline how violations will be handled. If an employee is found to share their password or let someone in a door access that they shouldn't, they're going to be written up. After 3 write-ups, they're terminated. Something like that. Something simple, wording that everybody can understand. Then you go ahead and design the policy. Many organizations follow these guidelines when designing a policy. Notify the users in advance that a new security policy is being developed. That's why it's important to have one person, in my mind, one person from each department from the beginning. That way, before this email ever goes out to everybody in the company, you've already been working on it 6 months, and more than likely, folks in those departments already know about it. Okay? But notify the user in advance that a policy is being developed and explain why the policy is needed. Provide a sample of people affected by the policy with an opportunity to review and comment on the policy. Prior to development or deployment, give all users at least 2 weeks to review and comment. And that's probably pretty short. In my experience, most security policies take about 6 months from start to finish to roll out. Okay? Allow users the authority to carry out their responsibilities in whatever policy they've been given. So the term security policy becomes an umbrella term for all sub-policies within your organization. This is just some policies. I'm not going to go into all of them. I'm going to give some popular ones you might have heard of. Acceptable encryption policy, antivirus policy. Let's go with automatic forward email policy, dial-in access policy, email policy, extranet policy, VPN security policy. The one up here at the top, acceptable encryption policy. There's also one called acceptable use policy that a lot of businesses use for browsing the web. Every time you go on the internet, you get a little pop-up message. We do here on campus, I believe, in most labs, where you have to click OK to get into that environment to begin doing whatever. Not just browsing, but just using the computer. So types of security policies: acceptable use, security-related human resources, password management, personal identifiable information, disposable and destructible, service level agreements, classification of information, change management, meaning when people get hired, get fired, get terminated, whatever you want to call it, what is the procedure for change management for those individuals? How long does their network account stay live and active? For most companies, within 3 days, their network account is disabled, or immediately their network account's disabled, and then in 3 days, it's possibly archived and stored. And all their computer and data is also backed up, and their computer cubicles wiped out within 24 hours. So just an example of maybe a policy for change management. Ethics in the state of Illinois, all state employees, and a lot of public or private employees also are having to do ethic training each year for liability sakes. Some insurance companies will not insure companies if they have not went through state ethics training. Okay, state ethics training has to do with just ethical things like, stealing, goes over politics in the workplace, goes over religion in the workplace, goes over sexual harassment in the workplace, goes over everything you can think of has to do with ethics. It's gone over, and you take a little test and you get a little certificate saying, I passed this, I know what ethics are. Okay, and then they'll insure that company if they have, say, 80% of the employees have taken this ethics training. AUP, I'm not going to go over much, I've already went over that, but basically just usually a script on your computer when you log in saying you accept this usage policy, which means what you do on this computer should be for work only purposes. Security-related human resource policy. This one addresses security as it relates to human resources. It would include terms like statements about how an employee's information technology resources will be addressed. That has to do with hard drive space you have. When you are terminated, what happens to that space? What happens to that data? And by law, there are certain things you have to give employees when they are terminated, data-wise. And so that's just how it is in Illinois anyway. Other states are different. Now in Illinois, it is an at-will state, meaning employers can fire you at will for no reason. You don't have to have a reason for it. That doesn't mean they can't take you to court, though. An employee can't take you to court, but you can walk up to anybody if you're a owner of any business in Illinois and go, "You're gone." Well, why? Decided you don't like you anymore, or you're not needed, or whatever. Okay. Now Missouri's not like that. Wisconsin's not like that. Indiana, our surrounding states around us, we're one of the few states that are at will state. And so, but because of that, there's a lot of lawsuits, by the way, in Illinois. A lot of lawsuits, workman comps lawsuits in Illinois. Well, they have to give them options, like say, if there's personal data they have on the work computer, they have to give them the option to give that data back to the employee. Yeah, pictures, music, movies. I mean, I've known people that have literally gigabytes of movies on their computer when they leave. Right? What, NASCAR? I mean, like boatloads of NASCAR videos. Okay, no wonder you're not working there anymore. But yeah, stuff like that they have to kind of give to the employees. But it's kind of weird because in Illinois it's an at-will fire state is what I call it. But they're nice when it comes to, you can do pretty much whatever you want to when you come to work. And by the way, when you get fired or you quit, you can basically take your gigabytes of data back with you. A lot of companies, what they'll do, because it's so much work to get that data back, you just give them the computer. You just they'll just wipe the programs, right, from the computer, the company programs, and just give them the stinking computer. It's a lot cheaper for them to do that than the IT guy to dump that data into some type of external drive or whatever. So a lot of times they'll just give them the computer. That's what they'll do. Which I still kind of comical, but due process is the principle of treating all accused persons in an equal fashion using established rules and principles. Again, this is going to have to go, I guess, business by business. Due process has to do with the business ethics, and some companies might not be so great in this area. Giving you due process. And then due diligence, any investigation into suspicious employee conduct will examine all material facts. This is stuff HR does all the time. if they suspect something in an employee, they will spend months investigating and building a case prior to bringing that employee in to confront them with whatever data they have found. And then it's up to that employee to then argue their case before the HR personnel. Sometimes it's arguable, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's cut and dry. But due diligence is going to be done not only the HR perspective, but also from an IT perspective as well. I have part of the sad part of IT, I guess, would be, downer part, I guess you would say, is say you got a guy that's worked at a company for 30 years and he's found, he's raised his family, maybe, getting ready to retirement, maybe 3-4 years from retirement, pornography is found on his computer. Now, first, you guys joke, people joke about, Joe's on pornography, but this guy's life's over when it comes to his career. Because literally, if you're let go 3 years prior to retirement in some companies, that's a difference of, say, 100% payout to, say, 50% payout. Just 2 to 3 years difference for pornography. And anybody, it can happen to it can happen to anybody. I mean, seriously, anybody in here it could happen to. It's just, I tell people all the time, you see pictures that pop up and it's going to happen on the internet, close them out. Because marketers have proven, if you see a pornography picture 3 times within, say, a day, 2 period, 24-hour period, 80-90% of people that they've tested this on have been hooked after years time. They've kind of traced these people and kind of did studies. And so they know what they're doing. And so, especially guys are visual, and so, more so than women. And so it's, pornography in the workplace is prevalent, and ads are pushed to guys to get hooked on it. But then HR, on the other hand, has to usually be the one that is the one at the end of the result, but the IT is generally the one that finds it first. And some companies, they just look the other way, but a lot of companies don't. They're pretty hard-nosed on that, which they should be. But beware, you're working in IT, you're going to be in computers, you're already in computers. That's going to be something you're going to see all the time coming across your network because other people are trying to view it. And it can, for some it's more susceptible than others, get hooked easier than others. And so just beware of that. That is something that is prevalent in a work environment. And it is sad having to see like a guy working 30 years and lose his job with 2 or 3 years left of retirement. It is kind of sad to see that. And so, that's why I promote for companies, get a really good filter that blocks that stuff because, yeah, but I can't get breast cancer. Who cares? I can't see, whatever. You can always let sites in one by one if you need to for a filter because filters are going to block things they shouldn't block, but, that's what IT's for. Let them know what the website is because here on campus they had that issue years ago where we now have a filter, I believe, on our internet for content filter. But years ago we didn't, and one of the arguments from a faculty standpoint was, well, I'm going to block, cancer research or breast cancer or whatever the case may be. And it would do that sometimes. But all it was, a little box that popped up that said, if they're faculty, you just type in the URL, send it to IT, and then Mike, that was here at the time, would just basically let all of them in, through the filter that the faculty needed. And so, it's a management thing, but I totally agree with both home and business having content filter for kids, adults, everybody, grandma, grandpa, because, secretary I knew was, heard her screaming one morning at a school. I was like, what in the world's going on? She had been communicating with a college student via AOL, Instant Messenger, and somebody had hacked his profile with a whole bunch of porn links in it. And so when she went to click on his picture, these links just are pictures everywhere, videos, She was like, ah! So I went over to I shut her computer down, unplugged it, took it back, cleaned it up, and said, you didn't do it. There's nothing you could have done to stop that from happening. So, she didn't go on AOL after that, but, people, it's going to happen. It's going to happen to every, the best of people. And so in those situations, you can laugh about it for sure. But it is something I definitely believe, as far as security policy, most companies, if not all, are looking into some type of content filtering because of all the junk out there. Password management is the next big one in IT management when it comes to security policies. Some companies have no password management. I've known companies students I've had in here that the administrator account everybody knew, the administrator username and password, and used it every day. That's pretty scary because it controls everything from network to local PC. The password policy is important, and it can clearly address how passwords are created and managed. You can have little classes on it, little videos to show people, websites. There's tons of website resources on, even website resources on creating passwords for people. There's software-based password creation devices, hardware-based, but the policy should be specify what makes up a strong password, and it's just education. Now, some companies do make it difficult in this area to where maybe you cannot use. I was talking to somebody the other day where it said that you couldn't use when you had to redo your password every 30 days at their workplace. We've all heard the fact you couldn't use the same password twice in 12 months. That makes sense. Okay, I understand that. But he was telling me you couldn't use a password that had the same characters together, like 4 or 5 characters together, in 12 months. So literally, you were having to create a brand new it wasn't just like, because most people, what they'll do is they'll, change the last 2 numbers or something every 30 days or whatever. And I suggest that to people. But this one, he said you would literally have to change literally the whole password each month. It was a nightmare. And he said, for the first time in my life, I'm writing my passwords down on my phone and storing it because I cannot remember. And this guy is a physicist. He's a physicist, and he has to write down his password every month because he said I just couldn't. It's too much. Couldn't do it because it was like a 13-character password, alphanumeric, and then every month it had to be totally. You couldn't have, like, I think he said 4 characters, regardless what the string with the 13-character string. Any 4 characters couldn't be the same in a year's time. Couldn't be right next to each other. It was like crazy. So that's definitely too difficult. That's way overboard, I think. But you'll see companies like that. But irregardless, you need some type of policy. Granted, you're going to have weak ones. You're going to have strong policy. You're going to have weak policies. So here is an example of a weak policy. Oh, lost my screen. Sorry about that. Well, while I'm getting mine up here, anybody have any stories of passwords that you have seen people use? You don't have to give your own story. Stories that people have used, passwords that people have used before in the past. That's kind of crazy. Anybody? Password names that people have used? Well, I know you got them. No? Like their address? Their dog's name, their wife's name, their kid's name. And granted, it's better than no password, but I remember there was a story of, Dennis and Menace, I think it was, Walter Matthau. There's a scene in there where Dennis is looking at Walter Matthau, who plays, who's the next door neighbor?
Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Wilson, thank you. And he goes, Mr. Wilson, I bet I know what your combination of your safe is. And he goes, no, you don't. He goes, yeah, it's probably your address. That's what it is for mine. I use it. It's the address I put on my combination lock on my bike. That's what it was. His address right there on the front of the street. And sad to say, it's what a lot of people use. Well, I'm going to have to kill that. Start that up again. Okay. Well, I've got it up here. I'll use it here. I've got an extra copy. We're almost done. So I want to get to the social engineering part. Okay. Let me get to the social engineering one. We'll stick on that one there. We'll do that one. There we go. Okay, so training, when it comes to your organization and security, or the lack of security for some organizations, you have some type of continuous training. Some companies do like employee training, and you get points for it. You get rewards for it, vacation, time off, whatever. And then some is just mandatory. You have to have it. So here are some training aspect as far as years you were born and some of the traits of those years, which I kind of find interesting. On challenges people have in just training. Most of you guys are near younger generation, so you're going to see some differences here in maybe what your generation is. But let's look at it. Prior to 46, traits of individuals in organizations in general, okay? Patriotic, loyal, faithful institutions. Number of population, 75 million. 46 to 64, folks were idealistic, competitive, questioned authority, 80 million. 65 to 81, self-reliant, distrustful of institutions, adaptive to technology, 46 million. This would be my generation. And then 82 to 2000, we could say present, pragmatic, globally concerned, computer literate, media savvy. That's you guys. In fact, this generation, like the last 5-10 years, or I guess decade, has the most entrepreneurs in any generation or any decade in the last 100 years. So students graduating high school and college in the last decade have created more independent businesses than any other decade in the last 100 years. And so that tells me that this generation, you guys, for the most part, are media savvy. You are, and this is definitely true, computer literate, globally concerned, meaning you're also the biggest generation that does most philanthropic work than any other decade as well. You give more than any other decade in the last 100 years. And so that's pretty positive, I think. That's definitely positive. And so also though, this generation, the last 10 years, I say generation, last decade, does not like the structure of work environments, meaning they want to be outside the workplace, interact, networking, don't want to follow the lines that have been built over the last 80 years, but have been very successful in also respecting those lines and building a pretty good business. You know, you think about the owner of Facebook, the owner of Twitter. These guys are younger generation, and so not even 40 years old. Some of them, not even 40 years old, they're already multimillionaires. And so that mindset is what IT's having to deal with. And so a lot of IT managers or CIOs are having to deal with generational issues when they're training employees, new employees coming in. Sometimes the employees actually know more about the technology than the person training them about. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So you're having to go over stuff like, okay, I did this in middle school. Really? You're actually, I'm spending time doing this, right? Okay, you're getting paid to do it. So I'm getting paid to do it, so I'll do it. But okay, whatever. And so, and they sit through it. But the issue is not the technology. The issue is this generation, I guess the last decade, that I find, is security. Security is one area, last 10 years, that people and all these everybody in here, including you guys, including those just graduating high school last 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, security has totally changed the scope of networking and computers for everybody. Meaning everybody's having to become more mindful of when you're at a restaurant, what do you do with your receipt now? I never used to think of it. I literally never used to think of it. Now when I have to go to a restaurant and sign my name, I tear up in little bitty pieces that receipt, which probably some of you do too, and destroy it. I don't want any trace of that receipt being left. Whereas before, I sometimes leave it on the table years ago. And they always give you, you got your master copy that they get, and then you got like 3 or 4 other copies they give you on top of that for some reason. How many of you also do that? You find yourself more aware of those little things like that. You're shredding stuff maybe you didn't shred 5 years ago. I'm doing that. Never thought of it. It didn't even pass my mind. Now I do. I also am leery of, I want people to check my ID when I use my credit card. I want people to check my ID when I use my debit card. A lot of you guys are like that too. It doesn't bother me. I want that. In fact, a lot of times I'll hand them my driver's license with my debit credit card. That way, if they're not doing it, it might spur that person on to maybe start doing it because it's important. I don't want other people's data stolen. And so training, yeah, there's generational things that are different between all generations and all decades. But I think everybody, regardless of where you fall at, when you were born, are all having to learn to be more aware when it comes to security. I mean, just what happened yesterday, the Boston Marathon. I mean, that's the first time we've had something happen since 9/11, I think, on the state side, isn't it? That's been, and that's security. That's security. And so now we're going to start, everybody, including myself. Yeah, I looked a little different around today. Driving around campus, driving home, going to work. Not paranoid, but like watching things a little closer, watching people a little bit closer. What's that, bag over there against the wall? What is it? I don't know what it is. Okay? All because of what happened yesterday. And so when it comes to IT and protocols, also security and training, you need to know the traits of I definitely think it's important to know the traits of the learners. What I do with younger folks that come in, if I can call you guys younger folks that have graduated high school in the last 5, 6 years, I'll ask them right up front, what do you know about passwords? Tell me. Da-da-da-da-da. Okay, you don't need to go through the password training. Okay, but here's our policy. It changes every 30 days. Here's what it is. No problem. Instead of going through an hour's worth of training, I ask them coming in, the new employee, what their password policy is. How do they handle their passwords? I find out from that answer whether or not they even need to go through the training. Okay, and 9 times out of 10, they have a good security policy already. They know what a good secure password is. They know not to share their password, right? They know not to share information with other employees, and so you definitely take that into play when it comes to training. Training style, I already went into all that. Now, some of you might be like visual, audio. I'm more kind of both. When I went to college, I would record all the lectures. That's probably why I podcast now today. But I would record all the lectures and then audio record, but go home and listen back the recording and type in the notes on an old typewriter. Because that was before I had a computer. I actually used a typewriter and just type the notes in. So actually by doing that process, especially for classes I had a hard time grasping, which I know you guys don't have that problem, but I had a hard time grasping, I would type those notes in by listening and it would get into my long-term memory. And I found out I did better on testing and things of that nature. And so, some of you are visual, some of you are audio, some of you are kinetic. You have to do something with your hands to learn, hands-on. And so that's why I try to include each week in most of my classes some type of hands-on something, because book knowledge is okay, and I believe in it, but without practical, hands-on, this is how you do something, you know, when you get a job, you're going to have to know how to do it. And so, or at least have an idea of what it looks like when somebody does it. And so that's the whole idea of hands-on training. And I think in community college, and I've been college level 4-year, master's level 2-year. So I've been in all different gamuts from community college to master level. And I will say community colleges, one thing I really like about it, not only that it feeds my family, but I like it that you do get more hands-on in general, more hands-on knowledge of your area than probably any other type of college. And community college in general, I think is good for that. And I've had students tell me that as well. I've had you guys tell me that, you know, other classes you've taken, it's really helped you because you've got to actually do something with it, not just sit in a, you know, when I was in college, you sit in a classroom of 300 people in a programming class. Hello, you know, okay, you know, and you got, you know, usually the teacher's not even the teacher, it's a proctor that's up there giving the slides out, and then, you know, you listen to a lecture for an hour and a half on C++ in a classroom of 325 people. You know, so, you know, that's different dynamics than what you guys have here, which is a classroom of maybe 10 people, right, versus 325 people. And so same content, but just a little bit more isolated. Okay, I'm going to end on this one, social engineering. Anybody heard of social engineering before? And phishing, those two. Social engineering and phishing, okay. These are really popular terms when it comes to IC security. Social engineering has to do with tricking or deceiving. Kevin Mitnick, you've heard of him, right? He is a guru of this right here. Now, granted, he also knows how to hack. He also knows computer hacking, for sure. But he's been interviewed multiple times, written multiple books. He's now a consultant. He's been put in prison a few times for his hacking skills over the years. But he was interviewed a while back, and somebody asked him, he goes, out of all the stuff you've done, what's the one thing you really pride yourself on over the years in hacking? And he goes, yeah, social engineering. Yeah. He goes, I can hack. I know how to go in and find out information for people and get into servers, but the most money I made as a hacker when I was, you know, a black hat hacker, illegal stuff, was social engineering. Just calling up a business and saying, hey, by the way, this is Joe. I'm getting ready to come in, I'm a network technician, going to fix your stuff tonight. I know it's almost 5 o'clock. He called like 4:59. But I need password access, door access to get in. I'm pulling up right now. Can you come out and give me your, I know this is a lot to ask, but I've got to get this done. The CEO asked me, so he dropped names like that. The CEO asked me if I could get it fixed before morning. Yeah, okay. So the IT guy's out there, you know, here's a card. Okay, I wrote down the password to the security. Let me walk you into the server room. Millions of dollars later, you know, an hour later, millions of dollars later, you know. So social engineering is how still today most businesses are hacked. Now, if we were to find out about the Schnucks cards being stolen, numbers being stolen, we don't know how that happened. We just know it said their system was compromised. It didn't say how it was compromised. Could have been a laptop was left in a coffee shop. It could have been, you know, somebody left a laptop on the counter and somebody stole it that had all the credit card information. You know, we don't know what it was because somebody could have swiped a credit card machine possibly. So we don't know what it was. But social engineering is the #1 way for networks to be broke into today still. And phishing's the other one. This is one of the most common forms. In fact, just today, we got an email from RBC IT department for faculty to not open an email from, and I did read the email before I deleted it. It said something about, you know, your password is expired. Please click this link to reset it. Something like that. Something of that nature. The email is from like network.com or something. Okay? Well, that's a prime example of stuff that goes on all the time. Okay? And the whole premise for that email was for somebody to click on a link, enter in your existing username and password, and then whoever the hacker is to collect that data. Just kind of like we did here in the lab, the man in the middle, but much easier because the hacker's not having to set up any software, not having to go into a cafe or something and collect this data. They're just sending an email and seeing who grabs at it. and there was a number, I'm guessing, that probably clicked on it, and that's why IT sent that broad email to everybody to stop doing it, okay? But you'd be surprised how many people click on emails just because, and it's been proven too, communication today is done how amongst this generation? I'm talking about, regardless of what age you are, number one way that people communicate today is how, in your mind. Phone, let's give you some choices here. Phone, walking over to somebody and actually talking to them, email, Facebook, or we'll just put social media, Facebook and Twitter all in one. Social media, we'll do social media, face-to-face, or phone. Which one of the three? How many think social media is the number one way people communicate? How many thinks phone? How many thinks email? So, you know, social media is definitely going to be the number one for sure. I think everybody agrees with that. I would say probably number two, email probably, I'm guessing. But a lot of people do phones. A lot of people definitely do phone still. But the reason I mention that is they're now getting, phishing's now actually not only hitting emails, but phishing's actually hitting cell phones now too. People are getting phished text messages from saying they're from AT&T, please upgrade, or please click on this link to get free ringtones. Well, yeah, you do get a free ringtone, but guess what? You also get a $9.99 charge every month from AT&T. Now, AT&T's even done that before, which I got in trouble for. But there's companies that are doing that where they're sending you an email or a text message saying, Scott, if you click on this link, you get a free ringtone of your favorite music, whatever it is. And you do get a free whatever, okay? But then also you notice the next month's bill, you have a $10 charge on it. And so phishing, in my mind, even though AT&T is a valid company, that's phishing to me because they're being fake in how you're kind of redirecting. It's not totally truthful in how they're doing it. But true phishing is somebody that says they're AT&T, they're not AT&T, doing the same thing. Whether it be email, text messaging, whatever, even phones. Here recently, they did an alert on all the news stations telling people to watch out for a scam. Somebody was calling elderly folks saying they were like they find out a cousin's name or a great-great-grandson's name and say they wanted some money, they were in trouble in Florida, police sent, and people fell for it. People fell for it. So not only phishing has to do with email, texting, but also just plain phone. And so one of the most common ways of social engineering is phishing. And so be watchful for that. Fake websites. There are browsers. Chrome does this. I know Firefox does this, to where you can bump up the phishing. It basically sees if it's a phish site or not, determines whether it's a phish site. Because the way I always tell people is look at the URL, because what it can do in the URL is it can look pretty good at the front end of what you see. But then if you highlight all of it and go all the way back to the beginning, that's when you can start telling it's not maybe on the up and up. An example would be PayPal. I'll end up with this as an example. PayPal has been hit over the years multiple times with phishing attempts, okay? It'll say on the URL something like this, okay? The email will be like, it'll say reset password in the email subject, okay? And up here in the, it'll say at paypal.com. Maybe it's something like help@paypal.com. Okay, just so you know, this from address can be programmed in by any novice. You can override a from address on any email you send to anybody. Okay, so that's not a big deal to do. Where you catch it is when you do a reply all, but don't do it, don't send it, just do a reply all. And then when you do the reply all, you'll actually see the real from address that it actually did come from. And a lot of times it'll be like this. Some weird domain at the end there. Okay, so that's the actual, could be an actual whole path that it gives you. Right there, it's, no, I'm not replying to that. And so, but it takes some education for people to know that, right? Because if they just see, well, it says help from PayPal, yeah, I got a PayPal account, okay, I'm gonna click reset password. Because if they just find out, if they do this to 1 million people, and let's say 100,000 has a PayPal account, or 10,000 has a PayPal account, and only 5,000 actually reply, that's 5,000 accounts they've gotten into and wiped out in 24 hours. And before PayPal actually finds out about it, because see, you've got to prove that you didn't do it to PayPal initially. You can tell them, hey, I didn't do this. Well, you logged in, it was your username and password, or no, I didn't. I gave, okay, let us investigate it. It might take 30, 60 days for that to be wiped out and be brought back into your account, if ever brought back to your account. And the same thing with anything that has to do with phishing or identity theft. People have to prove they didn't do it first. You're not innocent first, like in a court of law, like for every other crime. You're guilty until you prove yourself innocent when it comes to this type of attack. Because maybe you've known people that have had this happen to them. I've known people that have had this happen to them, and they've had to actually get totally new social security numbers. Because, yeah, they cleaned up they finally they probably proved, got a lawyer, spent $5,000 on proving they didn't do whatever, trace back the person that actually did it. But even when they trace it back, a lot of times nothing happens to that person. Literally nothing happens, because they have so much backlog when it comes to this type of thing, when it comes to courts. Lawyers won't even touch it. It's not worth it. It's not worth the money. Yeah, it's big bucks. Yeah, it's big bucks. And so where they're making the money at is not in putting the criminals in jail. It's where putting you and I, who get hacked, we're forking out money to cover our name or to get our name back. That's where the money's being made on the lawyer's perspective. Okay, because the criminal is going to probably get a public defender, even though he might have, $1 million in the bank. He's not going to spend it. He's going to get a public defender to do it, and no public defender is going to touch it. So, they're just, it's a vicious cycle. So education is important. Education is important, and then once you tell people how to do it and show people how to do it, it'll save folks a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of headaches. Because I would say in workplace and in home both, these two things right here are going on all the time. People don't say it, because I've had people actually tell me they've never had this happen to them, and then find out later they did have it happen to them. And by the way, they've lost a lot of money because of it, but they were embarrassed to say anything because, I'd be embarrassed, if something happened to me like that. And so it could happen to anybody, actually, but there are things you can do to save it from happening. And what I just mentioned will help if you train people that way, whether it be a session, whether it be a training session, whether it be a video that you have them watch. There's tons of resources out there on what we're talking about. But it will cost companies money to do this, but in the long run, it'll save companies money, because they'll have their data safe, they'll have their employees' data safe, and productivity, and even morale. I've seen morale in companies go up because people have learned things like this, and it's helped them realize, okay, now I know it empowers them to delete the email they thought they should delete anyway, if that makes sense. Okay? They've been sitting there with all this stuff in their inbox for months, just sitting there, and they've not deleted it because they're like, well, maybe I shouldn't delete it, I should delete it, shouldn't delete it. After going through training like this, they delete it. So it empowers people to do what they should be doing anyway. And so, but without education, you don't have that empowerment. And so, social engineering still. Is anybody doing their research on a hacker? I thought somebody was. Were you doing yours on?
Who am I doing mine on?
Yeah.
Well, that's still kind of up in the air.
Okay. Okay. But you are doing yours on some hackers. Okay, cool. Because if you ever get a chance to read any of Mitnick's books, or even go online and read a story, I definitely recommend it, because he's going to give you a lot of the stuff I've talked about, plus other information that will help you as far as training other employees on things to watch for. So 2 weeks from tonight, we start our final presentation, A through N. If you have any questions on anything as it pertains to your final presentation research paper, come up and see me before you leave. Otherwise, we are done. See you Thursday for the Drive Look Lab. Yes?
Research paper next
2 weeks. 2 weeks from tonight is when we, or 2 weeks, yeah, 2 weeks from tonight is when we start our research presentation.
You turn the paper
The night of your presentation. Yep. And the order of that, I don't know if you're here early, but the order of the presentations is whoever, first come, first serve on the presentations.